Alrighty, so episode 190 of Backpacking America. Wow, that's crazy to say. Third year anniversary coming up on May 23rd. It's going to be a big one. Still figuring out what to do for that, but it's going to be cool. Right now I got Frank Pomata with me, who is a employment counselor in Suffolk County, Long Island. He is right here local to everyone that in Long Island that's listening right now. For all of my friends out in New York State that probably want to relocate to Long Island or around the country that are listening and are like, oh, I wonder what's going on in Long Island. How do I get a job down there? Frank is your guy. Frank's going to be giving us some really cool websites, links, events that are going to help you find employment and keep employment. So, Frank, welcome to Backpacking America.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks, Anthony.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. So, tell us a little bit about what's going on. I heard you. We were talking a little bit. You had some job fair information you wanted to spread.
Yeah, the Suffolk County Department of Labor happens to host job fairs at local libraries on a monthly basis, and they're coming up. Actually, in June, they're going to be at the Islip Library in Suffolk County and also at the West Babylon Library. So that's June 1st, they're going to be in Islip, and towards the end of the month, on the 28th of June, they'll be in West Babylon. And then there are some other more specific kinds of events. Actually, this whole past week, the 17th to the 20th, we're doing a youth employment fair. Helping young people get summer jobs, and the U.S. Open happens to be recruiting right now for positions. For that event that takes place in August. So there's going to be a whole variety of things. There's a lot of people who have, the pandemic's kind of opened up a lot of people to the idea of maybe starting their own businesses. So the Suffolk County One Stop that's over in Hauppauge, it's a county agency. It's dedicated to connecting job seekers and employers. They are actually having a virtual event called Starting Your Own Business. That's going to take place as Wednesday the 18th. Actually, that was yesterday.
Oh
Sorry about
no! Oh, I
that.
missed it. Damn it.
Dang. And then, of course, there's outside organizations and entities as well. Government's not the only game in town. The Hauppauge Industrial Association, I know when I was a job seeker, I went to this event. They sponsor an annual huge job fair. That's taking place this year, Thursday, June the 16th, and it's going to be at Long Island Cares Center over in the Hauppauge Industrial Park. So that's going to be Thursday, June 16th, and it's a 9 to 3 p.m. thing. So you can find that online, I'm sure, if you go to the HIA's website. And then, there's a whole variety of websites that people can go to these days. The whole job search thing has really changed, in modern times. From when I first got out of college and started looking for a job, we were looking at the Sunday paper ads and stuff, and that's basically gone the way of the dinosaurs.
Yeah, now it's all internet, LinkedIn based, Twitter based. You could start your
Yeah.
own
Yeah.
side gig. You could drive your car and deliver food to people. Who would have thought? So,
Right, right. The whole gig economy thing. Well, and it's got, like everything else, it's got pluses and minuses. On the
mm,
one hand, job searching sort of at your fingertips. Hey, I can do it right from my home. On the computer and stuff. On the other hand, I've been in that position where you send the resume out, through a web portal of some sort, and often you don't even get any kind of a kickback of message of some sort, like, hey, your resume has been successfully received or whatnot. So that whole thing of like, hey, did this thing go into a dark, a black hole on the web, can be a little nerve-wracking. So that's one aspect that is, there's, like I said, there's the pluses and the minuses of these
mm,
things. Um, and then getting through something that people may have heard of called ATS, or Applicant Tracking Systems. Okay, and that's many companies are using that to sort of sift through candidates, and that becomes important because how you write your resume, if you haven't got the key words that match up with that job ad, the algorithm that sifts through the candidates and tells whoever the HR or the recruiter which people might be worthy of a second look or what have you. You might not ever get seen by a human being because you'll be sort of filtered out. So one has to sort of figure out that whole process too.
mm,
Um, when I advise people, I always tell them, there's three key documents. It's like sales. and you are the product that you're selling. So the resume, of course, is our first thing. Then, of course, you want to have a strong cover letter. And I always use the words concise and compelling. Because let's face it, there's one job opening, let's say, and maybe there's 60 applicants. You've got to grab that person's attention, the reader, and you want them to, be compelled to give yours a little bit of a closer look and,
Well, that's if you can get past the
go
algorithm.
further. Yes, exactly. Although hey, there is the direct approach of just kind of showing up sometimes,
I
and
love doing that one. That's my
dropping your resume.
favorite.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my favorite way to do it.
Yeah. So we've got resume, you got a cover letter, and then you want to have your references separate. Why would I say that? Because let's say that you are my resume, you're my reference. You're one of my references, Anthony. And all of a sudden you get a call out of the blue. Oh, hey, can I speak to you about this guy, Frank Pomata? Well, that's because maybe I gave my references out on my resume, and I've seen people do that, or with my resume. No, you want to wait until some sort of a firm job offer is being made, then give those references out. Plus, you want to give your references a heads up. I've had this happen to me a few times when I've been a reference for somebody where all of a sudden I get a call and I'm sort of stumbling a bit and I want to actually give the person a good reference, but I've been caught by surprise. They didn't take the time to give me a shout, drop me an email, and say, hey, Frank, I applied for, I don't know, we'll use an example from Bugs Bunny or something, Acme Explosives or something like that, or Acme Hardware, let's say, and Joe Smith's going to give you a call. Well, had they done that, I would have been much more prepared, and I might have even asked them and said, well, we used to work together, or you worked for me, and what do you want me to emphasize? Tell me a little bit about the things. We might have a quick conversation. So now when that person calls me, I'm going to be able to give a much stronger reference because I know the call's coming, I know what the job is, and what, the candidate wants me to emphasize,
Yeah. That's important too, because I sometimes actually I've recently, maybe it's my field, but I haven't been asked for references in a very long time for job applications.
Interesting.
Some places make it mandatory when you apply
Mm-hmm.
online.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the thing is now, say you're like me and you just get out of college and you're applying for, let's say, 20 jobs a day. Sometimes I would
Mm-hmm.
do 10 jobs a day,
Yep.
and if 5 of those jobs a day requires you to have references, what do you do?
Yeah. You want to keep track of that, maybe have a log, whatever it is. Everybody has different systems and whatnot. But yeah, you want to make sure your references, if you're being asked and sort of forced into it, which I really don't care for, but let's face it, right? You want the job, so we got to go, with what they say. I'm kind of glad, related to that they've stopped a lot, employers from asking for salary history in some jurisdictions. I think New York is one of those, because I kind of think that's not really fair. Like, I know when I was hiring, I would always, just put the salary range out there, and whatnot. But with the references and all, hey, make a list, have a list, and then maybe if it's a whole bunch, drop an email to those references and just say, hey, I applied to the following places and I was compelled to, give references ahead of time. And maybe it'll have you might want to list, the various companies and what the actual position is. And then, if I do know ahead of time that someone's going to give you a call, I'll give you a shout. You want to keep a good relationship there. Now, and on the other side of that whole interaction too is, as a reference, I know, I typically will drop somebody a call because I know what that waiting process is like, and I'll say, hey, Anthony, I heard from Susan Smith, and the conversation went well, or they asked me for, and I've seen this happen too, where you've got to fill out a form online as a reference, written
Right.
kind of a document. I think I see that a lot. I've seen that mostly with teaching type jobs, where I've gotten something from a school district. Be a good idea to just kind of, I like to let the person know, like,
Well, that
okay, yeah,
makes
hey, I
sense to
did it.
do it with that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But if you can at least give the person a sense of, if there was a conversation of like, hey, you know what, it sounded like they were keenly interested in you, It's I just think it's kind of cool,
So
to do that.
So you said something earlier about salary ranges, which I think is very. I'm totally for people putting out the salary. A lot of these
Yeah.
jobs at the job fairs and on Long Island in general, are they jobs
hmm
that could pay the rent and eventually have growth to it, or is this are they entry level, or do these entry level jobs actually have hope of you know paying your
I think it
necessities?
varies, by the job fair, by, if there's a specific audience. I mean, believe it or not, I went to a job fair that was organized by the Department of Labor not too long ago, and it was for folks with legal history, as we euphemistically say, folks who've got, some convictions in their records. And, let's
Hmm.
face it, they've got a rough, road, in terms of the job market. Um, so already, though, they sort of pre-screen the employers to make sure that the employers that were present there, that was a non-issue to them. That they were like, okay, hey, we want to give people a second chance. We believe in it, a second chance. So, in terms of that, it's going to vary by job fair. And I know some people think that job fairs are a royal waste of time, and I happen to disagree. But what I always did when I was a job seeker is I worked not just the employers, but I worked the line. I talked to the people in front of me and behind me and said, hey, what are you looking for? This is the kind of jobs I'm looking for, and engage them. I did the same thing when I went to, say, the library or a job center, like the Department of Labor. I'd kind of converse with the people around me. Because let's say I'm looking and I see something that's in their field that maybe they haven't come across, and vice versa. So rather than being competitors, we actually became, a support system for one another.
Wow.
And that's using the power of networking, really. You know, and like I say, same thing at a job fair. For people who refer, oh, it's just a cattle call, a waste of time, this and that. But I disagree. And sometimes too, you may not get the job at the job fair, but maybe you've made a strong impression enough on the person, and be sure to collect business cards if they're giving them out, that maybe there's a job they're hiring for in the future that you could be considered for, or you can have what's called an informational interview with them. You can say, would you mind, if I'm not imposing on your time? And again, everything is, be really courteous, and you don't want to waste people's time. People are just super, super busy these days. I think we're all doing the work that two people did maybe 20,
Yeah.
30 years ago. That's my impression anyway. Um, and sometimes you can do that, and say, I'd like to have sort of like a, an informational interview with you where maybe I can get some feedback from you. It seemed like we had a good connection at the job fair, and I know you didn't hire me for that particular position. And let's face it, sometimes it's totally not about you. It's just that the other dude or the other gal had, you know, let's use gaming terminology. They had the killer app, and that killer
Mm.
app sometimes is their so and so's sister, brother, classmate, or whatever. And that does. Let's face it, human beings are on the other side of that interaction, and sometimes those, one might say, well, gee, that's not fair, but it does happen, and so you may never know the reason why you didn't get the job, but I always say don't focus on that. Just there was a fantastic person. I went to a program called the Job Search Boot Camp some years ago, and it was the inaugural program. Gosh, I think it's supposed to be in like 2012 or something like that, a little while ago. But one of the great things that the lady who headed that up, her name by the name of Maria Frey, and she's still doing these too, is she said every no gets you closer to a yes. You're honing your message. I'm not keen on that whole term, the elevator pitch, because it kind of sounds stilted. I find sometimes for
Yeah.
you to have this whole little sort of 2-minute spiel, and yet you need to be able to quickly and concisely. Let's say you're at a barbecue and you meet this bank vice president, and you're looking for a job in banking. Can you quickly and concisely, talk about yourself? And these days, too, people don't want to just hear about duties. This relates back to your resume, too. The old way of writing a resume was to just talk about, well, this is what my duties were in, XYZ position. This was something Maria emphasized quite a bit in that job search boot camp. You want to talk about your accomplishments. Why did it make a difference that Anthony was in that position versus Frank? Did you increase sales by 30%, or let's say it's the broadcasting industry? Did you diversify the listening audience through X, Y, Z? You want to talk about what actions you took and be able to have some sort of, again, I want to get back to the compelling story. And the story might be about your job, or it might even be, I remember having a job interview that half of that interview was talked about a volunteer experience that I had done, that the woman was familiar with the event and some of the people involved in the project, and we spent a lot of time talking about that. That kind of community engagement, companies are looking at a lot more. I myself, we have talked about the concept of transferable skills. Now, I think a lot of job seekers have embraced that. Hey, my job disappeared, and perhaps that industry is undergoing a transformation, so I've got to kind of retool myself. So how do I take my existing skill set and adapt it to what is out there? Well, I think job seekers have gotten the message loud and clear and are thinking in terms of what would I be suited for. Unfortunately, and again, this is my own opinion, my perception is that a lot of HR folks, at least the ones I have encountered and heard from people about, as well as recruiters, are still sort of looking for that person who comes like right out of central casting, like everything they've done is like led up to that particular job or been in that particular industry. Well,
Mm.
I hired somebody one time for an after-school program. She wanted to be a teacher, and she was studying to be an educator, but hadn't yet done her field placement, where she goes into the school and is under the tutelage of a teacher and whatnot, doing her field placement. But this person was smart enough to put volunteer activities on their resume. What I noticed was she taught Sunday school for 5 years. Well, that to me immediately was an example of transferable skills. So as long as she could get me somebody who could, tell me that she showed up on time and the students were okay who were under her care, there's nothing untoward
She
going
didn't
on,
give him
let's face
heroin.
it, whatever, whenever you're dealing with a vulnerable population, and young people are just one of those, it could be senior citizens, what have you, but, the main thing concern when you're checking references, I want to know, hey, they show up on time, they're punctual, they're reliable. My key question as an interviewer when I was asking references was, okay, knowing what you know now, would you hire the person again? And I better hear a yes, and
Mm.
and one without hesitation, you know. Um, so anyway, this gal, this young lady had that on there, and I saw that, and it gave me an opportunity to give her that, open that door for her. We all need somebody to open that first door for us. And I think sometimes we forget about that as we get further down in our career, and we're thinking about, gee, what if this person, washes out or something like that and doesn't work out? Well, you know what? Not all hires are going to work out. Let's just face it. And even under the best of circumstances, you might hire that best candidate, and guess what? A week later, they get a call from that other dream job that they applied to at the same time, and then next thing you know, they're leaving you. So
I've seen that happen before.
it happens. And again, too, even with the no's, too, the idea of sending thank you notes. I had a friend who did hiring, and she always kind of thought, well, gee, that seems like kind of like, kissing butt, or, why are they thanking me for doing my job? Well, you know what? Cultivating that goodwill is a great idea, because let's face it, this happened with my mom one time. This was years ago. She was number two. And it was really funny because the woman referred to it that way, too. She didn't get this job, and about a week later, she gets a call, and the woman says, hey, are you still looking? Number one just told me she's pregnant, or she's leaving the job, something along those lines, and you were my number two choice. And as it turned out, my mom had not, landed something, so she ended up getting the job.
Wow.
So, you want to keep things courteous and whatnot. Sometimes, our emotions and our ego can be on the line.
Yeah.
Let's face it. Self-care is important too during a job search, Anthony. It
And when you
beats
get
up
the
your
job.
ego. That too. That too. I mean, the pandemic has really put a lot of people under greater stress, perhaps, than they had been. And I think that one of the nice things, this happens to be Mental Health Mental Health Awareness Month, May. And one of the things that happened with the pandemic is employers, I think, became a little more sensitized to the fact of their employees' mental health and well-being as well as their physical health and well-being.
Yeah.
That's super important.
So,
So
how have you
it's good to see
seen
that.
how have you seen mental health being taken more seriously in the job hunt and in the workplace?
Okay. Well, I think just the fact that we're having this discussion, that it's even on the table of discussion, is one element. The other thing, though, let's talk about the employers and all. They're now beginning to offer more in the way of um, mental health services. It goes beyond just an employee assistance program, which is sort of like crisis intervention and a band-aid. You know, having an insurance plan that is adequate, and covers people's needs is super important. Um, and when I've heard cases where people have had to call, upwards of 20 counselors before they could find somebody who took their insurance and was taking new clients, and that's happened especially during the pandemic. Therapists have just been overwhelmed by the demand for their services. So you could institute things in the workplace too. There's different practices. Uh, I think one of the number one things that we heard people asking for was greater flexibility, like working from home. Many people realized, well, gee, this is possible, and I was asking for this a long time ago, and everybody told me, oh, well, it can't be done. That alone can alleviate a lot of stress for, I mean, let's face it. Okay, we have a lot better gender equity than we did, but let's face it, it's not, where it could be. So it really falls a lot on women. So working women are really, looking for ways to be able to better balance, parenting and family life with their work life. That doesn't make them any less of a employee. In fact,
Yeah.
sometimes they're better. They're balancing. They're able to balance quite a bit.
Yeah. That's
So
definitely a thing too. Is that a lot of skills, a lot of jobs require mental balance because they're multitasking. And I've been
mhm,
seeing,
mhm,
especially, even when I go on LinkedIn and I go on and look, or I go on, I forgot what the other job hunt website was.
mhm, mhm.
It's drawing a blank. But whenever I look at jobs, I'll see must be proficient working in a high stress environment and must be able
Yes.
to multitask. And I'm just like,
Mhm.
uh, you again. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's tough too,
Yeah.
because not everyone. And those are the jobs that pay, and rightfully so, they pay. But maybe I don't want to work in a high stress environment for the rest of my life, and I want to do something, that's
Mhm.
my passion, but I
Yes.
shouldn't have to start for it. You know what I mean?
I totally do. And you know what? I would applaud those employers in one respect, is that at least they're being upfront about it. Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, it becomes all the more important that if you know that the jobs that you're putting people into are kind of like pressure cooker jobs, well, then what do you do to provide a safety release? Do you do you have some mechanisms where people can sort of, take a mental health day? Okay.
Mm.
I mean, I've talked to numerous people who have made up physical excuses rather than saying, "Hey, you know what? I just can't get out of bed today, man. I've been working 16-hour days, and and we're on this deadline project and stuff, and I'm spent." And so they make up, some sort of a physical ailment, because there is still sort of a stigma in American culture um, about mental health issues as opposed to physical health issues. So um, one of the things that employers are doing is that leaders are opening up about their own struggles. I just read something, I think it might have been on LinkedIn, that was written by a VP for NBC Universal, where he finally opened up about some struggles he was having. And, it caused a company wide discussion and a reassessment of, what they were doing or not doing
Mm.
around their employees' mental health. So, kudos to him, because, it still is a somewhat risky proposition. And you know what? I'm going to just put it out there right now. You're talking to somebody with one of those invisible disabilities, and I, for a long time, hid that in the closet, fearful for negative consequences. And finally, some years ago, I just said, you know what? Enough is enough. I need to be straightforward. You know, I had a couple of supervisors here and there who I felt we had a close enough relationship with and I could trust them. But you know, it shouldn't be that way where it's on a case by case basis. You know, we all, you know, let's say that I had a physical ailment that I needed accommodations for. If I should have a different emotional slash behavioral type of ailment or condition, what have you, that needs some accommodation, I can still be a great employee, but maybe I need some accommodations, you know, and
Yeah.
I now check that box off, you know, on employment applications. You know, hey, do you need any special accommodations? Now, I have not had to ask for them, but at least I've checked it off so that if I do have to, you know, I have something to fall back on, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. I do like that there is even discussion about it because in my generation, especially,
Mhm.
I mean, it's at least people are very open about it, and
Mhm.
I can't tell you how many people I know that are on psychiatric medication
Mhm.
and do have not only physical but mental emotional ailments as well. uh
Sure.
it was needed to happen, and I knew that a lot of changes like this would happen eventually as my generation aged into employment and
Mhm.
into upper management. Do you think that
Well,
the
kudos.
next generation— oh, I'm sorry.
Kudos to your generation for doing that. You know what I'm saying? We're talking about things that were very silent and hidden when I was growing up. You know, it was kind of like in the 1950s, people whispered if someone had cancer. It was almost like if you said the word, like you were going to catch it. And mental illness has been like that for a long time, too. Now, I think you were beginning to ask me a question, so please.
No, you make a good point. I was actually reading a book by Christopher Verga. He's a
Mm-hmm.
regular on this program, and we talk a lot about Long Island political issues. And he was saying that, in the 50s, when the Levittown houses were popping up, suburbia was flooded
Mm-hmm.
with Mother's Little Helpers type of pills. So
Yep.
what you're saying is you're speaking facts straight from the book and from lived experience. So, props to you for sharing that because it's really we've come a very long way in 60 years, 70 years. But
Yeah.
my question was, do you think that this generation is going to cause more of a positive impact on the work environment, or a negative one, or just a different one? I feel like it's more of the neutral. It's definitely going to be different.
I think a different one. Yeah, I'm kind of with you in that camp. You know, let's face it. I know we talk about the greatest generation. This and that. I don't know if there is a greatest generation. There's no disrespect either to the World War II generation. You know, look, they made some incredible sacrifices and whatnot, but every generation faces its own unique challenges, uh, brings to it different strengths, different viewpoints, and maybe looking at the mistakes of their elders, or just that things are evolving, you know, and perhaps things are can be talked about a little more openly. So, I think there's some real promise here. Um, I'm glad we're talking about things. You know, if we're at least talking, to me, half the battle in addressing any kind of issue, be it your own interpersonal issue, something within you, or maybe there's an issue between you and another person, or a problem to be solved, a business problem, is knowing that there is a problem in the first place. And if we're not discussing it, if it is silent, there's a problem right there.
Yeah.
Uh, One of the first articles that I wrote talking about myself and kind of, I guess you could say, use the analogy coming out. I know a relative of mine who's gay, kind of used that analogy when we were talking, and I told him what I was going to do. The article I wrote talked about coming out of the shadows, that I didn't want to have to hide anymore, you know. So again, once people begin to identify, and this also gets into other aspects in the workplace. the idea, it's the bathroom issue. I was
Mm.
in an office recently and I saw something really great. I forget what place it was. It was a nonprofit of some sort, and I went to use the facilities, and it said, "This is a gender-neutral bathroom. Feel free to use it, however, man, woman, or however it is that you identify." And I just thought it was both funny, but also, a great way of diffusing that whole argument. Because I don't know about you, at my house and stuff, I don't have a men's room and a ladies' room and stuff. I have a I have a bathroom,
Yeah.
and when one has to use it, one uses it, no matter who you are and how you identify.
I think a good way to diffuse that argument is you have a gender neutral bathroom in your home. So
Mhm. Why not try that in the workplace too?
exactly.
Yeah.
It's all just I don't know. I feel like a lot of the cultural stuff it's all just semantics at this point because at the end of the day who really cares? We're just trying to like survive.
We're touching on something though that seems like it's just words, and yet, you're talking about this quote unquote culture war. It's been going on for a good, for quite some time now in our society. I mean, look, we're looking at the possible, elimination of a landmark Supreme Court decision that deals with one of those hot button issues too. Um, we get hung up on words far too often, and we can't be afraid of words, and we have to be able to find constructive ways to disagree with other folks. Because let's face it, I don't know about you, but I haven't been in a workplace or other type of setting where everybody's going to 100% agree with how I see the world. And yet, some of the most interesting conversations I've had have been, ironically enough, with people who see the world very differently from me, and maybe they've taught me a thing or two. But that kind of requires my ears and my mind to be open, and
Mm.
for me to be secure enough in myself that I'm able to hear somebody talking about their views and whatnot. And as long as I'm not being sort of harangued or preached to, or someone's trying to convert me, but if they're just talking about why they think a certain way or their politics are a certain way, I'm not threatened by that at all. In fact, I think that that's great. It's like, to me, like being able to have an open conversations like that without it, and having it respectfully, that's what makes this country unique and beautiful. Is the fact that we don't have to all think alike. In fact, thinking alake's a dangerous thing to me. If we all, if I think about George Orwell and some of the books I read, I was a poli sci major in college, and some of the stuff we're seeing these days is a little kind of almost Orwellian. I think he'd be looking at this if he was still alive and saying, "This seems a little familiar. I think I wrote
Yeah.
about this."
The political division and this culture war stuff, this infatuation with it, is caused by growing economic insecurity?
Something, I think it is one of the factors that feeds into it. It's a bit of a sin in my eyes that we have such, we're in one of the most affluent countries, and yet the income divide over the last 40 some odd years has grown exponentially. Now, I'm not against people making a really decent salary and so like that, and rewarding hard work and all. I get that. I'm cool with it. But what about the folks? Okay, so let's say I'm Jeff Bezos or whatnot. Okay, not to pick on him. I'm just going to use him as an example because he's someone who folks are familiar with, right?
Right.
Okay, so yeah, your company's making money. You're doing good. Let's say you got stock dividends, and that. But share that with the people who helped you make that money. Be it in better working conditions, better pay, combination thereof. Um, I, I think I seem to recall Ben and Jerry's had a great way of dealing with this when those two gentlemen still own the company because I believe they've sold it. And when they started, they saw this as an issue, and they decided to have a rule of seven, I believe it was, where they couldn't make they as the top paid people, let's say, in the company, couldn't make more than 70 times or what whoever made it on the bottom. Let's say it was the person who cleaned the place, the janitor or what have you, right? Um, and if they got a raise, everyone below them got a proportional increase as well because the fact that they were doing well. Again, they recognized that And I think things like that could go a long way towards, diffusing at least the economic piece of it. People saying, "Gee, man, I'm following all the rules, but I seem to be getting left behind here. What the heck?" And so you've got this big group of discontented people out there, and legitimately so. You know, given we were all told, hey, work hard and this and that, and you get it, the American dream, uh, but for a lot of people, that isn't playing out the way it's supposed to, you know.
I actually, for the live stream right now, you sent me a picture, and it says there's no elevator to success. You have to take the stairs. And I like that image because
Mm,
I do believe in that.
mm,
I've been working since I was 15, and I'm starting to get better jobs and all these things. But it really depends on a lot of different factors to how
mm-hmm,
long your staircase is and how many flights it is. And
that's true. Yeah,
it's
very true.
a lot of that, that income disparity. Some people's staircase is 2 steps, some people's is 10 stories, and it's how do we make that American
Hmm.
dream possible? Not to say that it's completely dead, but
Right,
for a
right.
large percentage of my generation, people feel it is dead. But then there's also people I know, they're like, you know what, I went the union route, or they got a house somehow,
Hmm.
whether through union work or their parents had extra money and they, helped the kid buy a house, or they just, I don't know, or they sold drugs. I don't know, but
I
uh, I don't. Whenever I
love
see
it.
someone my age
We're
or
covering the whole gamut here.
yeah, we're covering the whole gamut. Like I always question, like how'd they get a house? Because there's a lot of people too that are just struggling,
Hmm.
especially on Long Island, to
Yeah,
maintain.
yeah.
Well, one, property taxes are out of freaking control, and I mean an apartment is anywhere from $1,300 to $2,200 on average for a 1 bedroom or studio.
I can attest to that. I avoided opening my lease renewal for my apartment. My wife and I got it about a week or two ago, and I was like very nervous. We have new owners of our apartment complex, and we're at the age where we're not looking to own a house. For us it just works. Everybody's situation's different. So my wife and I live in an apartment complex out here in Patchogue, and there are new owners that came in, and they're making wonderful physical improvements, but also they've been jacking up the rents quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife even did some research, and she told me, she goes, even with the increases, she says we're still going to be at the bottom of the median rental amount here in Suffolk County. Well, that is something that kind of has to be addressed. Now going back to the whole, how do we address that thing is we got to be able to make sure that there is equal access to the workforce and all, and that gets us to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Um, and we don't have that yet. There are groups who still face exclusionary practices. When I talked to somebody fairly recently. For me, a red flag, I was telling this person on a resume, is a person not putting their address down. I don't know about how you would feel about that, but I would be kind of like, in my mind, it's like, okay, well, what's the person hiding here? Well, this person had a very good, you know, response to that. My query about that. She said, something, because of the segregation here on Long Island, if people see where I live, they can instantly kind of pigeonhole what my ethnicity probably is, and that I got the impression, she didn't come out explicitly and say it, but that had negatively impacted her prospects in certain job searches. I was just like, wow, okay, all right, so there's something, where, it's almost like there's no universal rules out there. I mean, in general, I like to see an address on a resume, but then she presented me with what I thought was a pretty darn good argument for why one might not put it on.
Do you think that
Um,
that's like a huge issue in Long Island where people do throw out throw out employment candidates based on their perceived race?
I have to confess, I don't know. Okay,
Mm.
I do know this though. have the unfortunate distinction of being one of the most segregated, suburbs out there. I mean, let's face it, when Levittown was built, there were racial covenants where it explicitly said, those homes could not be rented to people that were non-white. Unfortunately, those were the times. And I'd like to wish that that was in history, and that was distant history. But let's face it, recent events, historically and politically, what have you, have shown us that, hell, we just had a shooting in Buffalo that was racially motivated. It seems. Um, there are folks that are still have some unfortunate, preconceptions. Okay. And rather than giving a person, a chance on their merits, do that judging. Can I say definitively whether it is or isn't? I think that's going to depend on the individual and their own level of awareness. And sometimes, let's face it, we've probably all heard the term unconscious bias. I only learned it in the past few years myself, but, you know, we don't know what we don't know, okay? So, we've all got blind spots. And so that is something that I think it's instructive for people in the hiring / recruiting arena to maybe do some training and some introspection about is what might be my unconscious biases. And I'm thinking about a gentleman who I heard at an employment conference some years ago, and he talked about having a bias against people with tattoos. Now, let's face it, a lot of folks have tats these days.
Right.
Okay. I personally, I couldn't care less. It probably depends upon the role and this and that, but I can understand with some employers, especially if you're in a frontline position, having concerns about it. But I don't think somebody should be explicitly excluded just for having tattoos. I think it needs to be considered, is it relevant? Is this a frontline position? Is this person going to be representing the public face of my company? Are the tattoos visible? I have a friend, and she has tattoos down her arms and stuff, not all the way, but on her upper arms. And she was told in one job that she was in, like, hey, you got to cover those up because some of them were, let's say, of people with moderate dress on, shall we say. So, yeah, I'm trying to be diplomatic about it. I'm like, okay, trying to dance around that whole thing. But, it happens. I had a fella one time at the Department of Labor who had a metal piece, I don't know what the specific name is for it, that went through his nose, okay?
Oh,
And he was telling me about,
septum.
I forget, there's got to be a name, just like the one that goes through your lips, and
Is it the
unfortunately I
one
don't know
like
the
the
name.
middle part of your nose?
Yeah, almost as if
Septum.
like you were a bull or
Yeah,
something like that,
that's a septum piercing.
Okay, so there you go, right, the septum. So this gentleman, he was a big guy, built like a boxer or a weightlifter or something like that, or a biker, let's say. And he had that kind of appearance, but he was like a gentle giant. My interaction with him were very cool. But he talked about it, and I just, of course, my first question was, well, please tell me that you're not wearing that in your nose. I'm sure it's removable when you. He's like, no. He goes, I'm not that dumb. He goes, And I'm like, okay. Yeah. I was like, I just had to ask, dude. So he wasn't wearing it, but he just had a certain appearance that could be a little intimidating. So so we talked about ways to tone that down a little bit. Let's face it, we all have different identities. We've got the identity that you and I have inside of ourselves of how we perceive ourselves and how we want the world to see, but then we have the identity that the world imposes on us. I happen to be Italian American, and yet, the sun comes out and stuff, and, I happen to be of Sicilian extraction.
Me too.
So yeah, I go to the mail, and to the mailbox, and I've got some tan going on. And so what I've never had here in our area, we've got a lot of Italians in the New York metropolitan area. I've never had anybody say anything anti-Italian to me, but I have had people make some kind of Hispanic-related comments to me where I've been like, what the heck was that all about? And then
Yeah.
I realized, oh, okay, so they must perceive me a certain way, and they must have certain feelings. We're covering some really interesting and sensitive, territory here, but I think that we got to get it out there. You
Yeah.
know, it does need to be talked about and discussed explicitly. Um, More and more companies are incorporating diversity and inclusion officers in their staff. In fact, I have a good friend who has such a position in a local organization. But I read a pretty damning piece on LinkedIn today by someone in a role like that, and this person straight up said, hey, look, you can't just put a position like this in and say like, okay, I've done the work, or ask for a workshop on something and say and try to kind of sugarcoat it. You got to be real. You can't just be kind of going through the motions, and that's what this person was basically saying. Pretty directly too, is that some companies want to just kind of go through most like, oh well, we've got a diversity and inclusion officer, so like, we ticked off that box. You know,
Right.
not good enough. You know, what is your representation like? Now again, are we hiring just to sort of have that representation? That of course then, the folks who maybe don't look like that start to say, well, wait, is that going to mean like, that I'm not going to get a fair shot? No, everybody should get a shot, Um, but I think in our recruitment efforts, we should have that on our radar. Is that, hey, you know what? We'd like to be as representative as possible. And why? Guess what? It's good business. I was working with somebody on their resume, and I just happened to ask them, hey, are you bilingual? And the person said, oh, yeah, I am. I said, well, how come that's not on your resume? And they, to them it was like, a characteristic of themselves that they didn't see as unique. But I was like, hey, look, Long Island is diversifying, and, that might be your killer app, you know, that there's two equally qualified persons, Frank and let's say, Manuel, okay?
Mm.
And Manuel speaks Spanish, and he's from, a diverse community. Well, you know what? If that company is doing business in the diverse community, let's face it, the universal color is green, the
Yeah.
currency of money. Um, then it's smart business to be diverse, and so that, you know, when I'm doing business, Anthony, and I'm sure maybe it's the same for you, right? Whoever it is that I'm doing business with, they're the public face of that company, and I'm doing business with that company largely based on that relationship often, and if that was that a good interaction, a bad interaction I had with that person, and you know what? When people are able to, I've seen more and more business these days in our area putting, habla español, like car dealerships, for instance, in their advertisements or whatnot.
Right.
That can make people more comfortable, you know, walking in your front door, knowing that, oh, okay, I'm welcome, like here, and they're making an effort to meet me halfway. That's pretty cool,
I think so
and
too.
it's,
I think that's
yeah.
fantastic. I mean, listen, we don't have an official language in this country for a reason. But
Good point. Good point.
we could probably talk for hours and hours, but it is coming to a close of our time,
Hmm.
unfortunately. Um,
No problem.
I
Understood.
would, I'd love to have you back on the show because this was a
Sure.
fantastic
Love to.
discussion. And when we talk about unemployment, we talk about race, we talk about mental health, because all these things are related to our
Intertwined.
class.
Yeah, yeah,
It's all
intertwined.
class
Yeah,
issues.
absolutely.
So
Well,
yeah,
good.
go for it. Sorry, yeah, I'm always bad
I
with
just
ending
wanted
these
to thank
things.
you for having me on and for engaging us in this dialogue. I think we covered a lot of territory in a short period of time. But I would just say, job seekers and stuff, hey, put your best foot forward. Don't be discouraged by the no's. Just keep plugging forward. And to the employers, look to diversify your workforce and be open to somebody maybe who is a career changer or is perhaps re-entering the workforce. Maybe they were taking care of a sick relative or something like that, a mother or a father or a child. Be open to giving somebody opening up that door like somebody did for you or me. Be that first one. Don't be afraid to be that first one. Give somebody a shot. And also mentorship and sponsorship. Those are important things we didn't get to even talk about, but maybe that's for the next time we converse.
Absolutely. Frank, thanks again for sharing your knowledge and helping my listeners out find employment and just giving a little bit of some hope. So thank you so much for coming on. And once again, everyone, thank you for listening. Make sure you check out our Backpacking America shop. Got some great hoodies, got some great t-shirts, beach towels, beach towels.
Love it, love it.
Yes, yes. Come on, you gotta get Backpacking America merch. Frank loves it. You
Absolutely,
love it.
absolutely. Yeah, go there, go there. And also check me out on LinkedIn. If you're
Yes.
somebody who is looking for a job, or if
Share
you're
your
a
links.
company that recruit, I'm on LinkedIn. Just Google my name, Frank Pomata. That's Pomata, and love to connect with folks. And if I can help you, I'd be glad to.
Awesome. Thanks, Frank, and thank you everyone for listening to episode 190 of Backpacking America. Until next time.